Evelyn de Rothschild joins us now to talk about investing in China and his latest venture, Weather Central, here as well. So Evelyn, thank you very much indeed for joining us. I just want to get your views on how things have evolved. Has it become a more open society? Has it become an easier place to do business?
Oh, I think it is, no doubt. I think it's a remarkable country. When you think of what has happened in the last 10 years, let alone 20 years, is an achievement beyond recognition. I think that one of the things that is so important is people must come to China, not only come to the East Coast, but to go into China and see the potential and see what has been developed by the government and by the private enterprise. A private enterprise is the biggest earner of opportunities, and I think it is remarkable, and I think one can but say the achievement should be recognized worldwide.
You are indeed especially interested in these reforms taking place to help the countryside along, aren't you?
That's right, and when I was here some time ago, I can't remember the exact date, I had discussions with certain people in the government because I had been involved in, I know it's small compared to China, by building a new town in England. And I think it was quite right that when one went to Beijing major station and you saw the people coming from the rural areas who had no jobs and had to be given an opportunity, this was the right thing to do. Obviously it's complicated. You have to put in the necessary requirements of living potential. You've got to give them good facilities. You've got to treat them fairly. And obviously, in the end, it's not something that can happen overnight. And I know your government at the moment is having its problems, but I'm sure they'll overcome them.
So, Evelyn, I want to just get to the here and now when it comes to China. There's a bit of uncertainty, but it's particularly a quandary as to what happens in terms of monetary policy. I believe that you've been talking to the People's Bank of China. What was the view you got from them?
Well, I haven't talked to them. I had the privilege of talking to the supervisor of the bank, who's an old friend of mine, Mr. Lu Ming-kong, and I listened to him very well at a very good conference given by J.P. Morgan last week. And I think the problem is, obviously, we live in a global world. Everyone is worried about how one can work closer. We are all concerned about the American deficit and what is happening in the United States. There is a currency problem, and it is very complicated. I think trade has dropped off a bit in the last quarter, and there's obviously the other important factor which affects people is the cost of food has gone up, and that is probably the most major problem to world society for those who can't afford it. When they go from 1 RMB to 2 RMBs, that's a huge jump for whatever they're eating. And then the other question which comes up all the time is, are the regulation of the banks adequate? I believe there are problems of certain banks in this country, or maybe not banks, but financial institutions as we call them, who have been involved in property. And of course property is a requirement for all, but it also can have its ups and downs, and I believe there are problems here. But I'm sure that over a period of time they will be solved. We've seen the same problem in the European Union at the moment. And I think that one's got to be patient, but it will be a rough time, in my humble opinion, for at least a year.
So, Evelyn, what about the RMB situation? You mentioned a so-called currency problem. I mean, do you see the day in the next 5 years where it's fully convertible and flexible?
Well, you're talking to a person who's quite old. If I'm around in 5 years, I'd like to think that that is the case. I think we've all got to move towards that opportunity, and I think the challenge also is whether we should move towards an international currency, because the speculation and the complexity of currency has caused some of the irritation, not only among the trading nations, but among individuals. But it's not for me to say how it will happen, but I think everyone who knows how to deal with these situations is very cognizant of the problem it takes to get over it, and I think the RMB will become more convertible. But when it'll come, that is a matter for, obviously, the powers that be.
I want to just change tack slightly. Of course, China's seen, central China, parts of central China, seen the worst drought that they've had in many decades. Now, you've got this investment with your wife in Weather Central. How could that actually help out in terms of planning for things such as droughts?
Well, I think, first of all, we have 25 broadcast clients currently in China, and we are the #1 provider of broadcast weather graphic solutions in the country. I mean, you had this downpour, I believe, in the last 24 hours, which has caused even people losing their lives, and situations like this. With the detail that we can put up through the technology that we give to the various weather stations, this makes people more aware of it. On the whole, it's a question of giving the opportunity. I mean, we have also launched an operation called My Weather, which gains access to the first truly personalized weather application for the web and mobile devices. You can go up on myweather.com and you can find out within a kilometer of where you are what is going to happen to the weather. It also gives a 10-day forecast. I think we've got to be aware that we're living in a time, I'm not going to get into the subject, which is a huge subject of climate change, but we do have variations of all sorts around the world. Certainly in England we have very precarious weather. We've had a drought up until about 10 days ago. And I think it is important to realize that you can use technology, which is offered by myweather.com, to tell you and be aware of what might happen to you, especially among the farming community. Also, we are very interested in helping wind power because it gives them... Sorry?
So, Evelyn, we're just running out of time, but I wanted to thank you for stepping into our offices there in Beijing. Thank you very much indeed, Evelyn.
Well, I'm very honored that you gave me the opportunity, and I thank you very much.